Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Heart of Christ Ministry. I am Reverend Shaun Robert Grant. Happy and excited to be here with you today. And we got a special edition because I am going to be gone for a few days, excitingly. Anyway, I wanted to make sure that I could give you something that you could use and you could go back on and study and really get the gist of. So with that being said, we are going to do a webinar today, called the Heart of Christ webinar. All right, we'll get to that in just a moment. But first things first, guys, your questions have been absolutely fantastic in every sense of the word. And I'm very happy and grateful that I have been in a position to be able to answer them, but also learn from the answers that I've been able to give to you and just learn from your questions, because it's you who really makes the difference. Having that outlet to be able to just kind of dive into how people are feeling as it relates to money, as it relates to money consciousness. So for that, continue to write to us. If you have any prayer requests or any type of feedback, anything like that, guys, write to us, ShaunG04@gmail.com. And look, if you're loving this ministry as much as I'm loving it, feel free to sow a seed into this ministry. The seed you sow never leaves your life. But what you do is you enhance the expansion of Heart of Christ Ministry. So I thank you in advance for that. If you decide to do so today, Heart of Christ Ministry, Venmo, PayPal, ShaunG04@gmail.com, Apple Pay upon request, Zelle, all that other stuff. Excuse me, all that other stuff, we can work it out. But yeah, with that being said, so just because this is a webinar, I'm just going to get right into it today, and I'm not going to go into where's my abundance. You know, where's my abundance should be a staple whether I'm on the air or not, because it's important for you to know that abundance is yours, right? But you got to put it in your consciousness first. So we're going to do that another time. Remember, abundance is all the time, not just some of the time. And we are getting into it right now. So let's get to the title of today's webinar, Heart of Christ Ministry webinar. Today, we make you rich. Yes, rich, 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 and rich. All right. So, and what do I mean by that? I mean that you will be rich, financially rich, if you practice what I'm getting ready to show you in 8 steps. That's not 8. That's 8. If you practice and you implement what I'm getting ready to show you, you will discover that you will watch your finances prosper. And the funny thing is you look at these things and they have absolutely nothing to do with physical money. Why? Because that's how we really and truly, got to fix my collar there. That's how we really and truthfully expand from a financial standpoint, is understanding that it's the mind, it's the consciousness, it's the practicing, it's the faith, it's the holding strong to the idea of what has been timeless and eternal as it relates to divine substance, formulating itself as the money that we see, right? So remember that. I want you to be really, really mindful of understanding that the money in the accounts, in the pockets, in the investments, and all that stuff, it's an outpicturing of what's going on inside of you. Okay, so with that being said, let's get right into it, guys. We're going to motor through this and give you as much info and wisdom as we possibly can. Let's start with number 1. Right? We're making you rich. How? Because you already are rich because of who you truly are. And if you don't know who you truly are, you got to awaken to the fact of who you truly are. And who you are a dynamic, divine, unlimited being made in the image and likeness of God. You are God itself. You are an outpicturing, a hologram of God, of the universe, which means what? All that God has, all that God owns, all that God will ever be, you are, right? So what does that tell you? That makes you rich right off the bat, even before you emanate into this life. You are rich. You are the rich one, not one of, but you are the richest individual walking the planet, because you have to know who you are and who you belong to. And if the Father owns it all, much like the scripture says, all that the Father hath is mine, I and my Father are one, right? It all comes together, right? God has given us freely, right? Every single thing that we could need in the form of abundance. And it's not just money, but for the sake of this ministry, it is money, and it is a lot of it. And you'll see as we go along, it's not, we mess up because we get into the habit of thinking, okay, where is the physical money that God's supposed to give me? No. God gives it to you in the form of his consciousness. And when his consciousness is radiating throughout your thinking and your feeling, then the outpicturing of finances can show up. But when you already know that you are the son, the daughter of a rich king, you are made in the image, you are a prince or princess in the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of God is just unbridled, open, unlimited consciousness that can be the substance, source, and supply for everybody. You have to know who you are. Even if you don't believe in that, guess what? You had to come from somewhere. So you're that thing still. Find a way to believe in it. Find a way to know that you are divine royalty. And with divine royalty comes divine riches, divine bounty, divine trust. Okay? When you know that, right? When you know that, that's one of the hardest things to implement, right? So I want to give you an example because I was thinking about this, and a perfect example would be this. Okay. Let's just say you were born to a king and queen of a massive kingdom, right? But then all of a sudden somebody stole you at birth and you grew up, right? You grew up not really having any of the lavished, abundant riches that you were, that you should have had because you grew up in a more impoverished setting. Well, guess what? Just because you grew up in an impoverished way doesn't mean that you still weren't a son or daughter of that king and queen, right? So in understanding that and knowing that regardless of the condition, regardless of what was transpiring in your life, you were still the prince or princess, which means you were still entitled to that lavish abundance and all those riches until one day you discover, okay, I'm a son of the king. I'm a son of the queen. This is my birthright. This is exactly happens when people shift from poverty consciousness to wealth consciousness. You realize you're not supposed to struggle. You realize that you're not supposed to be in a space of not having enough. So you tap into your inheritance. You tap into your divine heritage. And guess what? It frees up everything because you're operating from a different place now. You're not operating from Joe Dirt who, only had a few nickels or pennies. No, you're operating from the space of I own the kingdom and I own that kingdom and I own this kingdom, and I can have whatever it is that I'm willing to focus on and hold with conviction in my consciousness, which in this case is riches. I can have it. I can have it. I already have it is an even better way to look at it. Know who you are. All right. Number 2, the universal spirit that animates your life, our life, can only operate in abundance. So nature can only operate in abundance, right? Our bodies work in abundance, right? We don't have hundreds of cells. We've got trillions of cells. We don't take 2-3 breaths a day. We take thousands of breaths a day, right? The whole process of the body that unfolds is abundant in itself. And then you start to move out to nature. You start to move out to the outpicturing, the manifest visible world. And it all speaks of abundance, right? It all speaks of abundance. Spirit itself, God in substance form, only operates in abundance. That's all it knows. That's all it can know. Because if there was anything lacking, it would fall apart. That's why the universe has been created to be infallible, created to be expansive, created to just continually move and grow to an unlimited, infinite capacity. And guess what? That includes you too, because we're all just spirit. I'm just another form of spirit coming to you, to make you aware of your abundance, to make you aware of your truth. And that is, the divine mind can only know abundance. Can only know abundance. Get that down into your subconscious. Get that down as your truth. And I promise you, when things get embedded to your subconscious mind, they affect your behavior and they affect what comes to you from the outside, from the visible world, as opposed to the invisible world. Okay. So you want to understand, this gets back to who you are. Right? When you know who you are, when you know you're a God, you know that what's operating in your life is a universal divine spirit. And that's just an aspect of God. And it can only operate in abundance, which means what? It's only moving you towards riches, and more riches. If it looks like you're moving yourself towards lack, guess what? You're not purposely, you could be indirectly doing that. Right? And so what you want to do is fixate your consciousness back on this universal spirit and this animating principle that does abundance, that does creativity, that only knows those things. Right? And then you'll see abundance begin to show up, and slowly lack will move further and further away, and it'll become something that just looks absolutely foreign to you. But remember, the spirit that operates in you only knows abundance. I had a brain fart there for a second. It only knows abundance. And guess what? Tap into that. Hold on to it. Resonate with it. It is all you. It's all for the taking. All right. Number 3. The divine has given you all the money in the universe, but as substance energy. So we spoke about this, right? You're the richest person or the richest individual walking this planet. And that goes for everybody. Why? Because when it comes to substance energy, there is no limit, right? There is enough for everybody to have abundance and riches over infinite lifetimes, right? And so when we say stuff like this, like when we talk about 1, 2, and 3, the objective, the teaching is to get this down into the hearts and minds of the people listening to it, because when they finally get it, they begin to operate from that place, right? It's just plain and simple. You operate differently from a place of having $100,000 as opposed from a place of having just $100, right? You operate differently. Same with this stuff in consciousness. When something different is on the inside of you, you operate in a different capacity. You operate in a more abundant, a richer capacity, right? So when you understand, God has placed all the riches in the entire universe inside of everybody else. But guess what? Some people can access it. Some people can't. And we'll get to the point of how you access it. But you got to know all that substance is in you. And that's the beauty of the divine, that we never have to know, well, how does it do that? No, just know that it's there. It's there. And you can access it physically when you're willing to adopt that consciousness that becomes our supply, which is God's consciousness, right? That rich consciousness. So it's so important to know the truth of that and what is actually yours, right? It's like discovering a trust, discovering a divine bounty that's always been there for you, but you never knew how to access it. I'm teaching you how to access it right now. All right. Moving on. Number 3 is a good one. Number 4, you have the greatest asset to be rich, God's consciousness within you. Okay. So I did a message, I want to say 2 days ago, and it says God's consciousness is our supply. That's all you need to know. If you don't remember anything else, all you need to know, God's consciousness is our supply. And so how does that work? Right? How does that work to let us know that God's consciousness is our supply? Well, God is the animating principle. God is the all that is. God is the great spirit. God is the energy, the substance in everything, which means what? It's so abundant, you can't even call it abundant because words can't describe how actually abundant and expansive it is, right? That energy is. But guess what? You have access to that. You have access to it and enough to produce abundance that you could support as many people as you want, including yourself. But it just depends on how much of that consciousness are you willing to open up yourself to, and more so become aware of. Because when we become aware of God's consciousness, we realize we step into this place of having, and there is no lacking. There is nothing that says, well, I don't really have enough. You would never say that when you understand God's consciousness and you realize that it's your supply. This principle itself, this consciousness, this awareness creates an endless amount of flow into your life. And you build this faith and you build this trust, and you wake up, you move through every moment of the day, always knowing. And I love Psalm 23, verse 1, because it describes it perfectly. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. And that is truly the way we live when we know that God's consciousness is our supply. That's all you have to know. Consciousness, remember, awareness, your thinking, your feeling, it's all focused on the divine. It's all focused on source. And all you have to do is set that cause into place, and then it resonates as an effect in your life, as money, as opportunity, as resources, as happiness, as joy, as peace, as love. First and foremost, love, because everything's love. Just give it a shot. Stay focused on there, and you will see the effects of it open up in the most amazing ways possible. Number 5, guys, we're halfway through. Stay with me. Okay. Be rich in consciousness, and then you'll be rich in reality. Right? Be rich in consciousness, be rich in reality. So I just spent a couple minutes talking about you have the greatest asset, right? So if you know you have the greatest asset to be rich, you're going to be rich in that asset. And so how do we be rich in the asset we just talked about? Seek ye first the kingdom of God, right? Seek the kingdom first. Seek the consciousness. And you know how you seek the consciousness of God? You sit with it and you focus on your breathing and you connect. And if you really want to dive into it, well, I always say, dearest God in me, fill me up with an unlimited amount of your consciousness. And all of a sudden I just get goosebumps, and I realize the consciousness is overflowing me, and I can feel its presence. I can feel God's presence. I can feel it running through me, my body. Any ailments I have, it creates a healthier feeling body. It's almost like electricity reviving me to a higher state of being, to a greater state of being. And it becomes one of the most phenomenal experiences. And you can do this all day, every day. And I'm telling you, it makes your consciousness rich. It makes the way you think and feel and act in pure, unfiltered abundance, right? That's what the God consciousness does. And so life is set up because of the big creative mind principle, universal principle that operates everywhere. It's set up for what? It's set up to where whatever is in our consciousness has to be our reality, right? Whatever's in our consciousness has to be our reality. And if you have God in your consciousness, you will live a rich, fulfilling reality. No doubt about it. It's an infallible principle. Remember that. Nothing can show up in your reality until it shows up in your consciousness first. And that's for everything, no matter what it is that happens. It has to show up in your consciousness first. And the one thing I wanted to add here, there's a quote that says, I'm not rich because I have money. I have money because I'm rich. And what that actually is telling us, what that actually tells us and says is this. That says that the emotion, the feeling, the energy of having has to come over us before money can ever flow into our lives, right? Because if we're living in a way where we're repelling it, and all that is being tapped into separation, saying like, oh, well, I never make enough money, or saying like, I don't know what I'm going to do these bills. No, you've got to tap into numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 first and foremost, and then you'll move into this state of having. And that state of having, that creates a consciousness that opens for the physical money to come in. Remember, rich in consciousness, and then you'll be rich in reality. Okay. Number 6. put God in parentheses, which is rich, same thing. Rich consciousness creates opportunities to make rich decisions. Okay. So, a lot of the trouble comes in a sense that people have the right ideas, right? You want to invest, you want to do a real estate, you want to do intellectual properties, you want to do, all this stuff, you want to, whatever it is, get into the stock market. But guess what? If you don't have the consciousness for those things, they're not going to work, right? They're not going to work. The one of the biggest reasons why I started this ministry was to help people with the spirit of money, because when the spirit of money is there, it leads to right decisions. It leads to rich decisions, right? It's almost like expecting a second grader to do 12th grade math. Now, unless it's an extenuating circumstance and this individual is a straight up genius, you don't learn your timetables till you get to when I was in school, like 4th grade. So how can you do math without having that foundation that you need, right? Same here. Like, why would you go jump into stock market and investing and stuff like that, and you don't have the consciousness to make that become a success? And this goes with business. This goes with independent contractors, sole proprietors, whatever you're doing, even at your job. You want to be successful at your job? Become a success in your consciousness first, and you will make all the right decisions possible, right? When I used to work different jobs, I would always get it in my mind. I would have what we call a success consciousness. And I would always make sure that whatever I did was going to be a success. And I built that on the inside, and every single thing that I did was a success. It was a success because I was moving from inwardly to without. And that was how the universe worked. The same goes here, right? Before you start doing anything on the outside, you got to make sure that you're right within. And when you have that God consciousness, it's going to make sure that you do all the right behaviors, making all the right decisions, and it's going to translate into some prosperous activity happening in your life all the time. All right? Staying with me, guys. Number 7. Doing great. In the grand scheme of infallible balance, the universal spirit is always moving us towards expansion, i.e. riches, abundance, prosperity. Okay, so I say things a number of times because I want you to get it into your subconscious mind, because if you get it into your subconscious mind and you hear me say it enough, it'll begin to operate in your life. So the universe is impeccable when it comes to balance. It's always moving you back to balance. And another name for balance as it relates to the universal energy, universal spirit, love. Love is pure balance. Love is center, right? So when we're off center, when we start to move, the universe swings us back this way to try to move us back to balance, and it stabilizes us right there. But then there's times we move again, and so it moves us back, right? We talked about this with money, I believe last week, where whenever you circulate money out, the universe immediately goes right into balancing that with bringing money in, right? But we have to be open to it. We have to be open to that consciousness of universal balance, of knowing that whatever goes out is going to come in, whatever comes in is going to go out, and you just keep the cycle. And you more importantly, you trust in the principle more than you trust in the transaction. Okay. A lot of times with money, we get caught up in transactions and we get sidetracked. It knocks us completely off center. So you let's say you pay your rent, and you pay your rent as $5,000 a month, and so you do that. And instead of you realizing, once I give this 5,000, I'm going to get it right back in, you say, oh, I just gave 5,000. Well, $5,000 is a lot of money. Why? I mean, like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to pay this rent. I'm confused. I don't know what do I do? And then you're completely off center. But the great thing for us is that the universe is working us right back to that center, and if you take time to really quiet your mind and quiet the thoughts of stress and worry and concern, the positive, uplifting, universal, divine thoughts will come back. And it will say, like, even something as small as, you got this, like you're abundant. Remember who you are. Remember that the divine mind can only know abundance. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're back. You're back in alignment, right? You're back in that balance. So for us, when it comes to riches, because see, here's most people's ideas of riches. And this is just from my own experience. Get a whole bunch of money and then just hoard it, right? Keep it hugged in close to you and just, but see, money can't survive. And when I say money, I mean the love current, right? It's love energy. It can't survive. It can't thrive unless it's circulating, right? So being rich is not a case of just having a lot of money and then just not giving it and just keeping it tight close to you, right? It's more about as soon as that money comes in, you got to circulate some back out and you got to keep the cycle going in order for it to thrive. And guess what? The more you get in unison with that concept, the greater your cycle grows, right? The greater your cycle grows. And that's all it is. That's the journey that we take from a financial standpoint, is understanding how to expand that cycle, right? Because it starts out small and the universe sees, well, most of us, we start out like this. It starts to look like that. But then we finally start building and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, bigger, larger sums of money comes in because you know whatever goes out has to come back in. Whatever comes in has to go back out. But it's in a balanced capacity. It's the universe will never ask you to give anything that throws you out of balance, right? It will only ask you to give what it knows you can still give and still keep your center, still be in alignment with love. So remember that anything you give, it has to come back, right? It has to come back. Know that. Don't be fixated on the transaction. Don't be fixated on how much money is going out. No, just know if it's going out, it's got to come back, right? That's a universal principle. It's a universal law. Number 8. Okay, so if you've happened to do my course, I almost knocked the computer over. If you've happened to do my course, you'd know that the very last thing, the bonus thing, other than the 12 principles I gave, was this. And this is so neat because it's so simple. Okay. As within, so without. As within, so without. And so you see, within means thought. Without means manifestation, right? So I love this because, and you could even change it up and say, as above, so below, as in heaven, so on earth, right? All it is it's a play on words as to how consciousness operates, and consciousness in the form of money for us and how it operates. And I can guarantee you right now, this principle is working in every single one of our lives. Why? Because it's a creative principle. It's supposed to work in that way, right? So I can tell you, if you give me what you're thinking about money, or matter of fact, you give me your manifestations about money, I can tell you exactly what it is you're thinking by the patterns, the way that they show up in your life. Whether it comes in droves or it's like sporadic, or, you're not seeing anything, I can already tell you what it is that you're thinking just by observing that. And that becomes the biggest key to discovering how to invite your riches, your true divine riches that have been basically bestowed upon you even before you've emanated into this world, right? So what we have to do, we have to take an honest look at our finances. We have to take an honest look at what our finances have looked like in the past 3 months, 6 months, even this entire year with COVID. What do they look like? Okay. And then just begin to ask yourself a few questions. Have I thrived during the COVID-19? Have I suffered? Right? Have I been kind of in the middle? Have I placed my power in the government as opposed to in the divine source, substance, and supply that is the God in me? So you begin to ask these questions. And when you ask these questions, it just shows you where your thought process is. And a simple shift in thought can release a whole lot of money into your life. It's amazing how that works, but it does work because thought controls everything. When I mean thought, I mean your deep, dominant subconscious thoughts, right? So a lot of times thought forms, mental equivalents, sit within our subconscious mind, and they just create circumstances from there. But what we can do, okay, what we can do is we can dive into those by looking at, okay, the simple question to ask is my life, is my financial life the way that I want it to be? Is my financial life on point the way that I want it to be? If it is, great, continue to do what you're doing. If not, or you feel like you want more, okay, dive into my thoughts. What is it that I believe that's creating the financial state of being that I'm in right now? Right? What is it that I believe that's causing that to unfold? And when you're really honest about those type of questions, guess what happens? Ideas pop up of what could be stopping you or holding you back. And I'm telling you, when that happens, it's breakthroughs, it's freedom, right? It's breakthroughs and it's freedom. And look, it has nothing to do with physical money, right? That's just the effect. When you start taking care of the thoughts, the feelings, the consciousness, all that stuff, you'll realize, man, I hadn't even thought about physical money, and yet I'm having more and more of it flow into my life. This is pretty doggone amazing. But it's just that simple. All you need to remember, as within, so without. As in thought, so in manifestation. As above, so below. As in heaven, so on earth. It's a balancing act when it comes to the universe and the divine. It always wants that balance. So it always has to be a cause to an effect, right? Unless you're dealing with God, who's a cause of itself, everything else, there has to be a cause to an effect. And remember this, money is an effect. The cause to it is the God consciousness, is the way you think, is your ability to have it before it shows up into your life, and your ability to know that it's yours through divine inheritance, through divine bounty, divine trust. It is yours. You just have to embrace it. All right. Woo! 8 methods. All right. I really feel like today we made you guys rich. So what's the next step? The next step is, if you take exactly what I've given you and you study it and you really implement these principles, your financial life will change. I promise you it will change, and it will sometimes change faster than you think, but it's all a consciousness thing. It's all a mind thing. It's all about really diving into what it is you're feeling and what it is you're putting out into the world. Okay. With that being said, guys, if you have any feedback, any questions, any prayer requests, anything, feel free to write to us at ShaunG04@gmail.com. We'll get that as soon as I possibly can and get back to it. What else? And also, look, I enjoy doing this on a extremely high level. And it's important to me that you know what I know, and I'm happy to give it to you. I'm happy to explain it in a way that continually raises consciousness of everybody listening in. And so with that being said, if you feel like your consciousness has been raised, if you feel like you've been inspired, if you feel like you are in a position that you're better than you were beforehand, I encourage you, sow a seed today into Heart of Christ Ministry, Venmo, Heart of Christ Ministry, PayPal, ShaunG04@gmail.com, and Apple Pay upon request. Zelle, got that happening too as well. Just send me an email. We'll work that out. Either way, whatever you do, your generosity and kindness is appreciated greatly in advance. And so with that being said, ladies and gents, that wraps up our webinar. Feel free to share this webinar, because guess what? There are people out there that need help financially, and they're doing the same old stuff that they've done before, that they can change it up. If they just did a minor change, they would see a big difference show up as far as their finances go. If we're going to live at this time in this life, at this period, money has to be a priority. Money has to be a priority in a sense. It has to be able to flow into our lives in an easy way that enables us to live the life that we choose, right? So share this webinar, like our Facebook page, Heart of Christ Ministry, sow a seed. Definitely thank you in advance for all those wonderful things. And with that being said, guys, I am out of here. Take care.
Every dream begins with a vision that sees everything before anyone else ever can. A vision that ignites the endless power to make all your dreams come true.